Hi, this is James from Ironclad walking you through the Ironclad integration with Coupa. Our integration has two parts. The first is built around the requisition process and ensuring contracting can happen in parallel with requisition approvals. And the second is called Contract Sync and sends completed contracts from the Ironclad platform back to Coupa. Both of these parts can be done individually. For example, if you're a company that uses a lot of sourcing events and doesn't use requisitions early in your flow, you can use Contract Sync to send contracts back to Coupa as part of your sourcing event and then use those contracts to launch the requisitions. We will today show both of the parts working in unison, but it is important to remember that you can use either individually depending on how your process works. So let's start by going into my cart. And making a request. You can see we've added a custom field here called contract required, whereby we can indicate whether a contract is required. We can also indicate that no contract is required for this requisition or indicate that we're using an existing contract. Customers can take other approaches to this selection of a contract. For example, you could have a rule where only certain commodities will launch a contract or where only certain dollar amounts will launch a contract. Because our integration is built upon Coupa's approval flows, we can use all the power of the approval flow conditions built into Coupa to decide when a contract is needed. For now, I'm going to say we're using an existing contract because I just want to indicate and show some of the automation that can be built in. I'll add a line item. And save. I'll add a second item for demo purposes. Save that as well. And then choose my chart of accounts. Now I'm going to submit for approval. You can see that because we've indicated that an existing contract is being used, we have a prompt telling us to ensure that each of the requisition lines has a backing document. So as I haven't done that, I'm going to go back and continue editing. I actually, in this case, don't have a backing document, so I'm going to change my mind and indicate that a contract is required of the type SaaS vendor contract. You can now see we've added two approvals to the requisition approval chain, one which will be responsible for launching the Ironclad contract and one which will be responsible for ensuring that the contract is executed after procurement is approved but before the PO is issued. So we have a two-way control ensuring that we don't issue spend too early, either in a contractual sense or through the PO process. Now I've got that corrected, I'm going to submit for approval. You can see in this flow, we've first got a procurement approval. This is quite common with our customers who want to check that everything is correct about the requisition before looping legal in, and potentially also check that it meets some minimum bar of likelihood to be purchased before going through the sort of costly process of legal and contractual review. For now, I'm just going to skip the current approver so that we can demo the rest of the integration. So now we've reached the launch vendor contract, and what that's doing on the back end is going into Ironclad, telling Ironclad that there is a requisition that needs a contract launches, identifying the correct contract, and then seeing if it can launch automatically. If all the required data for the legal team is already present, it will automatically launch the contract and begin the process of legal review. In a case like the one I have here, where I didn't fill in all the data or haven't got complete matching between what procurement pick and the data they collect and what legal wants to collect, then it will automatically send an email asking for additional information. You'll also see that in the Ironclad workflow custom field here, we've provided a link to go and fill in the rest of that information right here on the requisition. So I'm going to open that in a new tab. So now we're in the Ironclad experience. We can go through and begin filling in the information that wasn't collected as part of the requisition process. I'm going to add a PDF here, indicate that the vendor in this case does not have access to confidential information. I'm going to do a fixed term type with a renewal date, with an expiry date. And you can see that the data that was collected in the requisition has been brought across from the Coupa requisition into Ironclad. So we can pull the counterparty name as the supplier name, counterparty signer email as the supplier primary contact's email. We didn't have a name for this primary contact, so I'm going to enter that in manually. The address for that vendor has been brought across. The Coupa requisition number is here, as is the business purpose. Both the line items are presented in a table here. The total cost was brought across correctly as well. We haven't done any negotiation yet, so there's no savings percentage. And I'm also going to indicate here that there was a termination for cause option that is favorable to us. So I'm now going to submit. So now we have a linked workflow with Ironclad that links between the Coupa requisition, if I click this, and the Ironclad workflow. We also have a legal and a procurement approval occurring in the Ironclad workflow, as well as the requisition flow that we showed before. So what I'm going to do now is show the process of how the two approvals interact, or the two approval flows interact. The requisition and the legal approval flows can happen in parallel, meaning that you get to the process of approving spend much quicker. You can also decide which of your teams like which platform the most. For example, if you want your IT team working more closely with legal in Ironclad and your finance team are more used to Coupa, that's completely possible. You then go through each of those processes, approving, until you get to this final linked approval on the requisition side. So now we've reached that approval, and the execute vendor contract approval is pending. If we go back to the Ironclad workflow, you'll see that that procurement approval has been automatically approved because of that approval being reached in Coupa. This way we can provide an automatic control ensuring contracts don't go out for signature until the procurement approval chain has been completed. I now go in and approve here and get to the signature step. While we go through this signature process, the requisition is still being held in Coupa, ensuring that the PO is not issued until we have a legal agreement in place. Ironclad automatically integrates with all your e-signature providers, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to pretend we have a wet sign packet just to make the demo run more quickly. So we have this MSA. I'm going to indicate that everyone has signed and confirm and proceed to the archive step. Before I do, it's worth just showing that this requisition, and I'll refresh, is still being held in the execute vendor contract step. So now I'll confirm that everything is signed and proceed to the Ironclad archive step. What's great now is that if I go back to the requisition, you'll see that a final approval has been given now that the contract is fully executed and the PO has been automatically issued. So through this flow, you gain two real core advantages. The first is that your business users no longer have to do duplicate data entry, doing a launch form in Coupa and then coming in and doing a launch form in Ironclad. Data is passed dynamically at that launch step. And we also manage your data fidelity. If all the data is there, we will automatically launch the workflow without asking for any more information. If some of the data is missing, we provide a link to go and finish the launch of the workflow that either that business user or another member of your team can complete. You'll also get the two-way control at the end of the process, ensuring that you never sign contracts that procurement isn't happy with and never authorize spend contractually in that way, and also ensuring that POs don't get issued ahead of legal agreement being in place. So if we return to Ironclad, we can show the second part of this integration. Everything we've shown to this point is our requisition sync, and what we're going to show now is the contract sync. So we now have a process requisition, we've had the control, we've had the better business user experience promoted by our requisition sync. But we have a contract in Ironclad that is not reflected in Coupa. And if you have any downstream systems that depend on Coupa contracts being present, whether that's reporting in Coupa itself, whether that's creating requisitions in Coupa, or Coupa syncing that data to another system like your ERP, that data isn't currently there. Contract sync is our tool to solve that problem. So what I'll do now is approve this, so that all the data is correct and this contract is ready for archiving. In the Ironclad system, what that means is that I've now created a record of a signed and agreed to contract which appears in the Ironclad repository. I'm just going to do a page refresh. And once more. And you'll see at the bottom here now, we've also got an external link associated with this completed contract in Ironclad. If I click on that link, you'll see it's taken me to Coupa, where we now have a new contract and that vendor agreement I just completed that's linked correctly to the correct supplier, has all the term type information that I put in correctly mapped across, and even some of that additional data I added during the legal process, for example, the termination of cause option, has been mapped across here. So we now have a feature-rich and data-rich contract in Coupa to use either to do processes like creating a requisition or to drive your reporting or downstream systems like your ERP. In this way, we can close the loop and make sure that both your procurement and your legal teams are empowered with the latest data on what you're contractually committed to. This is all backed by the powerful mapping that Ironclad bring to all our integrations, allowing you to send some of this more complicated data, like legal terms, and the key data, like the amount you've agreed to spend. So that overall is the Ironclad Coupa integration. If you have any more questions, please ask your Ironclad representative and they'll be happy to dive into more detail.